feel like I've wanted to make a video for a very long time. It's something that I kept thinking about, and I guess now I'm finally recording and putting words out there. I guess I wanted to do this over some gameplay, so this might take a while.
Gather round
But
for the hottest game this
I feel
midsummer.
like this is something that's important for me to do as an individual because I'm fast approaching 30 and I just feel like if something happens, then there won't be really anything out there about me that exists. And, I might sort
Fight
of
well
just
out there.
vanish. And I want there to be at least some semblance of myself out there.
Seems like the competition is heating
Um,
up.
Even if the worst had happened, I suppose. Um, so, yeah, I don't have a script or anything, but I guess I just wanted to talk about me and my journey and everything notable that I can really think of, I guess. So, I guess I should start at the beginning. Um, so, I was born in Nottinghamshire,
Stay on this
which
path, champion.
is in the United Kingdom in England, of course. And yeah, I've for now it's pretty much mainly where I've lived all my
That was
life,
tremendous.
apart from the one time where I went to High Wycombe, but that's a separate tangent. I was born in 1996, and I feel like I don't really remember a lot of my earliest memories. Um, I mean, the earliest memory that always comes to mind that I can think of is there was a particular house that I lived in, and there was like a pushchair. Um, that's all I can really remember. I I don't think I
You're
have
a real
any
contender.
bold memories until I was like four. I feel like I might have gone to some kind of like preschool or something, but I never really asked much about it. But I remember there being some sort of like mild
Aw,
chili being
that's all right.
served.
Want us more?
I think. Yeah, it's definitely something that I can recall. Because I remember I ended up like I don't often have like um those kind of foods. Um like really nice Indian food. I don't tend to make it a lot. But I definitely remember like the distinct taste of like chicken korma or something along those lines in some kind of cafeteria setting. I'm not sure, for some reason that always comes to mind from somewhere. So that might be the earliest memory. That or the pushchair. Like those two memories are like the earliest in my brain. And I'm not sure. I feel
Fight
like it's
well out
important to
there.
log them. Okay. So from there, I remember starting school. Supposedly, I had a autism diagnosis when I was quite young, which is peculiar because it doesn't normally get identified until quite a bit
There's
later.
always the next one.
But I know autism was something that runs in my family. Um,
Stay
my
for one
uncle,
more
who I
round.
still get along with pretty well, he's autistic. He's nearing like his 60s. Um, funnily enough, he's like into video games and football, and you know, he's. I remember he definitely helped make my childhood pretty bright. Yeah, he's still a good person, but he's sort of got this like what's it called? He finds stuff like reading and writing extremely difficult, even at his age. And people have their own strengths and weaknesses, but I know he's incredibly gifted with like animal knowledge. Like
Things are bound to
he
get
seems to
better.
have like this aura around animals where they always feel like safe around him. I don't know how to describe it, but I think that's always been true, as far as I can remember. There's always something he'll mention as well. But anyhow, that was a long tangent, and I know that me, as an individual, I am autistic. I've always grown up with autism. It's been a distinct part of who I am, I suppose. For better or for worse. Oops, I just misplaced that.
Escape the darkness with me.
But I think because of that, I've always felt like I've grown up being treated a little differently. Like, I always had like a support person with me throughout my earlier years in education, and I always had like a learning support corner. I know, especially when I was younger, I was pretty prone to meltdowns. Like, I ended up getting highly stressed by social interactions. I was definitely, when I was younger, I was pretty quiet, but I got stressed quite a bit. And I hope I didn't make other children feel too uncomfortable back then, come to think of it. I think it was something that was largely out of my control.
Show him that Fire Festival fury.
But on top of that, like, I had a really good primary school that I was in. It's still up today, but I remember that the people there were really understanding. And all of the teachers were, I don't know, pretty caring. I remember there was even a point where, like, during one of my meltdowns, I, like, tore down a whole display that people had made, and that stands out in my head as, like, one of the worst things that I've ever done, because that's something that was, you know, crafted by a load of people. It's probably something that everyone who made that was, like, really passionate about making, and, you know, I tore that down, and I still can't help but feel guilty that that's something that I did. At least it's something that I thought about.
Time to hire help?
Yeah, this is gonna be pretty rambling, I think, because I've not really planned something like this before. Anyway. So, with that, I know I had some, like, behavioral slip-ups, especially around, like, what we call year 5 and 6, when I was, like, 9, 10, 11 years old.
Fight well out there.
I remember there were a couple of times where I lashed out, and I said some pretty hurtful things that I wouldn't even say today to people. Like, although to be fair, like, past a certain point, like, I'm always like, I don't really curse or anything like that, and I'm quite reserved, I suppose. But there was an unmistakable anger in me, and a lot of that was likely due to family goings on,
Back to enjoy the
which
bonfire.
I will now elaborate on a little bit. So, in terms of my family, things have been, well, I talked about my uncle already, but yeah, the rest of the family is probably one of the biggest traumas in my life, sadly. And a lot of the bad habits that I picked up as sort of survival techniques for growing up have kind of stuck with me, which isn't great. But sort of like a survival mechanism, I guess. Um, but I do distinctly remember that, I don't know, my grandma and my grandfather, um, they were always really nice to see.
Fight well out there.
They used to live in like this really big house that this apparently, I remember they said recently, or my grandma said recently, that they sort of have that specifically for like grandkids, like myself and my sister. It was a specific thing, you know, that they had. I thought that was pretty interesting. Because it was such a big house, like, you walked in, and there was like, it was just so grand and spacious.
Tremendous.
I remember also having Christmas there as well. That was really nice.
I'll take that deal. Here's your coin.
Yeah, Christmas was a really big occasion, and on top of that,
Time to hire help? 3 makes a golden.
top of Christmas, we had like, I don't know, big summer barbecues. There was a really spacious garden that we had, like, in the back of the house, and it had like different levels to it. So there was like a bunch of stairs that you could just like walk up and go to like each level of the garden, and it looked really amazing. I remember like how full of flowers it was and how well maintained. And there was like, in the summer we'd have like a trampoline out that was really big, and that was really fun to just like, you know, jump on and have fun and stuff. Oh, my computer's frozen. Whoops. But on top of that as well, hopefully this is still recording. On top of that, we also sometimes had like a paddling pool, so in the summer we'd all like hang out and it was very cold. The wall was so cold. I remember like it was freezing, like absolutely freezing to sit in there. But it was fun. It was definitely some of the highlights going to that house. So yeah, I still get along with my grandma now. But sadly, my grandfather passed away when I was in year five, so probably around 9 or 10 years old. Um, and that caused a fair few issues. Looks like Hearthstone's completely unresponsive. If this is still okay, yeah. We're still recording. Good. I'll just go back in. Don't worry about that. So, with the garden stuff that we had, that was really cool. Just overall, I have to remember it was a really nice experience going to that house.
Another star from my shop. Time for your reward. Another minion for the warband.
What, like it's hard?
Save for one more round.
So, yeah, this is again, this is very freeform, so this is why I also have gameplay in the background. So, if there's like a long gap, sometimes like I find it tough to like process and jump between stuff. It's why I feel like, you know, when I live stream sometimes, I could be a bit slow with stuff, because it's pretty hard for me to focus on multiple things at once. But at the same time, I feel like my personality always needs to be doing something, which is kind of a funny conflict. Yeah, regardless, I feel like it's probably time I touched on one of the biggest sort of traumas. This is too loud. The biggest sort of traumas that happened, and it was definitely the start of it is when like my granddad passed away, and it caused like a big rift in the family that was noticeable even by me at that age.
That was tremendous.
And simultaneously, it put to light the large rift between my, I guess, of the family as a whole, because, well, things weren't great. And it was specifically with my mother.
I would have chosen the same one.
So my mother was someone who is troubled, I guess. But the issue is, like, being around her kind of created this normality that even if stuff was like completely like out of the ordinary and unreasonable, it wouldn't be recognized as such, and it just became some sort of normality, even though it probably really shouldn't have been the case.
Keep it up.
Because I guess she was a very disruptive individual. And it did mainly come from her being quite deep-rooted with just a lot of problems. like there was always a rift between my all sides of the family and and I wish there was some way she could have sort of sought help or tried to realize about her behavior and why how it would impact the people around them, as well as causing unnecessary stress on herself as well. I never knew my father, and I still don't. I've not really bothered. He seems to, well, I guess I was told that he kind of abandoned us and started a new family, but I also understand that my mother's personality might have ended up pushing him away, because she does have a sort of habit of pushing away people who, what's the word for it? Pushing away the people who are the closest to her and being very disruptive. She often had this presence of, especially like in a public setting or around other people, she'd always try and present herself as like really friendly and happy and lovely, but behind closed doors she like dropped that, and she was very scary sometimes, in a sense of growing up around her. It felt like pretty much all the actions that I did, like for example, what's the word for it? There's like a psychological word for it, just how she acted and what she did. I think it was called double binding. Yeah, that's the word for it, double binding. So it meant that, like for example, if she gave me like a chore to do, like say do the washing up or something like that, like go do some washing up or something, and I'll do it, and then like if I did do it, she would always complain, or not complain as such, but should be upset that I wouldn't have done it correctly in her eyes, or there'll be something like that I did wrong, and she would get incredibly angry about it. It'll be like the amount of anger she had wasn't normal in relation to what had been done.
Easy mark.
Yes, like, it'd be very disproportionate.
Stand up straight. You need this.
And that would be an issue, because it'd make it pretty difficult to sort of be around. Sorry, let me turn this down a little bit. I realise it's a bit too loud. So, whenever, like, for example, I didn't do the washing up because I was worried that I would do it wrong, she'd still get really angry at me for not doing it. And it seemed like I couldn't ever do the right thing around her. And even, like, at a young age, and then I'd start growing up, and I'd start trying to form habits, and become a bit of a people pleaser, I guess is the word for it. And it got to a point, or it gets to a point, where you lose a bit of your sense of individuality because you're trying so hard to become what you think someone else wants, but it still isn't good enough regardless of what you do. And throughout all this, I had my sister as well around. But honestly, I see my sister as sort of like, what's the word for it? She had a lot of responsibilities for the age she was at. My mother always made out that like I was less capable than other people because I was diagnosed with like autism, and it often resulted in my sister having to take an incredible amount of responsibility, usually looking after me and trying to do chores and all sorts of things. And she was my sister was a really kind and thoughtful human being. It's just, I wish, I think the word for it is parentification. I wish she didn't need to have that much responsibility at that age, I guess. You know, that she could have just had more time and had more freedom to be herself. As I felt that she kind of didn't have much of a chance to do that. And often my mum had like this real almost obsession, or like she thought it was like a necessity to put like makeup on like every day, and she would wake up at like 2 o'clock in the morning to like put makeup on, but she would deem it something that's necessary for her to do, like it was a necessary action, as if like something as essential as eating food, which she was quite malnourished, and she didn't always look after herself the best, because again, I know I'm saying this like, I know she's an incredibly flawed human being, but becoming a single parent is a hell of a lot of responsibility. But I still don't think it was right to sort of make or force that responsibility onto us, because, you know, we were all kind of forced into this situation. I didn't choose to be born, I guess is the main argument you could say with that. And yeah, I guess this kind of started the transition to my teen years, because on my grandfather's passing, it sort of created this whole era where I felt like I was a lot more down, and I felt like the drama between different sides of our family reached a peak, and we sort of saw complete rifts and shut-offs in the family that was often decided by my mother. Because she would say a lot of hurtful things to people. And it was very much like a do as I say, not as I do type thing. Oops. Pretty much. So from there, I guess we had like the, what, teen years, yeah. So secondary school was a bit of a jumble, because I started out at the same place my sister was at, but then that became like some kind of weird union, it meant that that was only applicable for like the year 10, year 11 students. So essentially what it meant was my sister stayed there while I moved to another school because I was younger. And yeah, that place was, looking back, it was pretty crazy. I guess secondary school is often like that. You know, it's kind of very unfiltered. You're very much around people who want to push the boundaries of what they can do and what they can get away with. So I was bullied a fair bit because I was both like, I really did kind of retreat into my shell a little bit because of both what was going on at home and my own sort of self-identity. Like, there was a lot of stuff, or like a lot of common things that I didn't really jump onto or recognize. Like, for example, school fights. I feel like this is one thing that stands out to me. Like, school fights, everyone like would always run to the place where the fight's going on and like be really excited to watch people get hurt. But I never went to it, and I was like one of very few people who I noticed that did not want to watch these fights happen. I just kind of stuck to myself, and while people I knew just like ran off or whatever, I kind of just did my own thing. And I think it was weird because I always wanted to try and be a kind person, especially with like what was going on at home. And I wanted to feel like my actions could, you know, help people. But I think back then it became a really messed up and venomous form where I wasn't really having enough self-care, and it didn't feel like I could escape stress, like both in school and at home. The main thing I found comfort in was gaming. Gaming is something that's always stood by me, especially my hyperfixation on Pokemon. Growing up, like, I loved playing that game. I loved playing Pokemon. I remember my uncle had a copy of Pokemon Red and Blue, but he never really got into Pokemon because he could read the text, so it was difficult for him to progress in games like RPGs and stuff. But instead, I guess that might be why I ended up playing them, because he probably realized this and, you know, knew that I might have a better time with it. So gave me his copy of Pokemon Red, and then eventually I got a copy of Pokemon Gold, and Pokemon Gold to me was like the first major Pokemon game that I started out on. Like, it was a lot of fun. And I remember how I just played the games to death back then. It was also fun because my sister also played them as well. So we'd like co-op play them and like do all the trades and stuff. She would get like the second version of each of the Pokemon games while growing up. And that was really cool. But I feel like a lot of stuff about myself at home, my mother kind of tended to put me down about a lot of my hobbies and interests. She'd often say that all I did was play computer games, and, well, when I asked to like do stuff like see people or whoever were my friends back then, who I don't really talk to any of them anymore, but she would usually kind of deny me seeing them a lot, or like whenever I did see them, she would mention the fact that I'd seen them and then kind of begrudge me for it. So it wasn't something that I got to do very often. So because it was something that I didn't get to do that often, it just ended up becoming very, I don't know, I felt very isolated. And, you know, it got to the point where even, I don't know, I feel like the bullies almost stopped picking on me, like, at one point after a while, because I would often, like, run out of classes and be really distraught over trauma and the like. And yeah, I became a very difficult person to be around, especially as I went, you know, throughout the years. I remember also that I specifically made it so I wouldn't pursue relationships with my mother around. I know my sister went into a couple of relationships and stuff, but they were often interfered with by my mother in some way. So I choose to make it something that I didn't pursue because I didn't really want to put anyone through that. And at the same time, I remember I did have like a crush at the time, but I ended up projecting a lot of upset onto them, and it ended up being the case that they sort of, what's the word for it? I ended up hurting them a lot with my actions, like not physically, but like mentally. And I had such a little amount of care for myself that I'd keep like self-deprecating all the time and believing that I deserved to be upset and in pain, and you know, they'd have to witness that. And it's not something that you really want to put on other people. Like, I hate the idea, especially nowadays, of putting that much strain on someone else. It's not something that I want to do, and it scares me, the concept of being someone who takes up so much space. So things kind of culminated, and I had a very big self-hatred for myself. And that lasted until like later on in my school years as well. I feel like the drama as well at home, and like my mother gradually got more and more intense with stuff like the way she'd punish us and the reason for punishing us. Like, I remember there was one time where she like threatened to throw me through the window or something, and then I got really concerned, and she essentially said, oh, well, maybe you should just go and lock yourself outside. Oh, these might have been two separate instances, but either way, I remember I was like in my pajamas, and it was like early morning in winter, and she locked me out. Or didn't lock me out as such, but she told me to go outside. And I was so, like, worried about what she would do if I didn't just force myself to go outside in the cold, that I went out there for 40 minutes. And then when I went back in, she was immediately like, you did that to yourself, you know? Like, she didn't take accountability for telling me to go out there or anything. She immediately said that I chose to stand out there for that amount of time, and that was me doing that to myself. And I feel like that kind of started a horrible trend of me kind of not taking care of myself as much. You know, I was probably like the skinniest I'd ever been at school. Like, I was actually skinny at times. And I know that I was intentionally trying to be fed. I think my mum really didn't want it to seem like I was being like malnourished or whatever, because she was worried about what people around would think if they saw that. And she cared very much about what people thought of her. Like, that was a big deal. It wasn't so much like she was worried. She cared a lot about people's impressions of her, I guess. But it got pretty terrifying. Like, a lot of the stuff she'd do, and then again she'd start getting worse with like hitting and just wanting to cause harm, and then blaming us for it. Like, for example, when she hit us, like, she'd say that like I did that to myself, and like there was one time, because I knew she was gonna do it, that I raised my arms to defend myself, like in front of my face, because she was going for me. And she said she would call the police on me because I threatened to attack her, because I seemed like I was being aggressive. It was that kind of like trying to tell you something, or to gaslight you into believing that you are doing something that you're not. And it has a really heavy psychological toll on you that you still feel, I still feel even now, you know. Just wish things could have been different. It's like, I wish there was a way I could have reached out to my mother and like ended up, you know, saying the right thing, but I genuinely don't think anything I could have done would have changed the situation. And all I wish is that I could have gotten out of it earlier and be able to live my life at a younger age and erase those bad habits quicker and find out my own identity a bit quicker, because I really lost a sense of who I was. Like, I guess my brain was just anxious and in survival mode, you know. I was often told that I'm autistic, so I didn't understand things. I didn't understand what I was doing. And I believed that, and I believed that I was a very incapable person, despite my good grades near the end of my school years. Like, I got mostly A's. I still was made to believe that I was stupid, and that like my autism will always hold me back. Again, my sister was one of the major sources of comfort throughout this whole thing, and although she never really tried to stand up to my mother that much, she really did try her very best to be, you know, a good person to be around. She always kept an interest in the games that I played, and often played co-op with me. And those were some of the best times I had growing up. You know, having someone to play couch co-op with. Like, we'd play like Resident Evil 6 or whatever. That game wasn't great, but like, we'd grow up and play like horror games and stuff. And she's, you know, right now she's off living her own life, and that's awesome. She's engaged, you know. She's probably gonna have a wedding next year. Like, it's gonna be really cool. And I'm just glad that, you know, I feel like she's found herself, and she, you know, she deserves that happiness with with the boyfriend that she has, you know? And yeah, that's a side tangent. Another side tangent. I'm good with those. So, what else do we have? It's sort of all reached a peak. I left school with not many friends, and then I went to college, where then was when I started to question more about what was going on with things. Because I couldn't really contain my emotions. It got to the point where stuff was happening so frequently, and I was without both the medication or therapy that I would have needed to handle that situation well. I met some friends at college, but again, those never really stuck either. I feel like we were all still quite flawed individuals back then. And I think it's probably for the best that we all split after a while. But at the time at college and university, it was nice to have that, you know, a friend group who was a bit more nerdy, I guess, and that didn't judge you for liking video games or whatever, you know. It wasn't like school where people just were very judgmental, and I feel almost like it's kind of like the raw, what I feel like is almost a raw envisagement of what people like. They think something, so therefore they have to say it, you know. Like, for example, in school there was like a lesbian relationship that happened or something, and I thought that was great, and it was nice that, you know, they'd found each other in that. But everyone, like, or like the majority of people at school around them, very much made like noises whenever they'd go past. Were just very disgusting about that sort of stuff, and there's just a big lack of acceptance. Like, if I feel like it's almost, if it doesn't affect someone, then they won't care about it until it matters to someone around them. And it makes me pretty sad that that's a way that people think. Like, they have to be given a reason to show, like, any sort of care or compassion. I think that's really sad in my eyes. And it's something that, like, when I have, like, a community or whatever, I try to embrace people being individualistic, unless it's, like, hurting someone, you know. I feel like it's important for people to not feel like they have to kind of act a certain way around people, or, you know, even though I'm guilty of doing that myself sometimes, I don't want people to feel the same way. Or if people don't understand something, then have a discussion about it, you know. Don't have, or should I say, you should challenge your preformed judgment about people. Like, everyone's different. I want to be around people who are all different. Like, to me, that's important. Otherwise, you kind of stagnate, you know? So yeah, we went through college. I did a course in game design, which was, yeah, it's alright. I do regret doing that, though. I do regret going to college and university so early, and I do wish I went into, like, a job field, or like an apprenticeship or something, because I feel like my course that I took wasn't very practical, and with my conditions and with what developed when, well, later on, which I'll get into, I feel like I kind of wasted my degree going there. And yeah, I really wish I went for something that I could do long term and that wasn't, you know, customer service reliant. Because, gosh, that is definitely another story. So either way, you know, university ended and stuff, and near the end of it, I actually decided to leave home. I got to the point where I realized what was happening wasn't normal. You know, with my mother, and her anger was getting worse and worse. So I eventually decided with my sister we should just leave home. And she was very reluctant at first, but eventually we went through with it. We had like one of her friends come over in a car, and we went in to sort of confront our mother and say we're leaving, like we don't want to live here anymore. And we had like our it was my sister's friend. She was like at the door, and if stuff started to escalate, she would just come in and show herself. And it did. Immediately, my mother started arguing and getting extremely angry, of course. And then my friend came up and they just completely 180'd and were just silent for like the rest of the time. So I just grabbed my stuff, and from there, I left. Sadly, my sister's place, or my sister's friend's place, only had enough room for one person. So I ended up becoming homeless. I spent a bit of time living in a hotel, which was a weird experience. It was like a one-star hotel that doesn't exist anymore. But there was like, from what I was told, I didn't see any, but I was told there was like drug dealers and all sorts of stuff going on in there, and that I did well to, you know, just keep to myself in that time. And then eventually I ended up moving out to my own space. Like, at first I was like moving between friends' places, but with my trauma, I was pretty difficult to be around because I would often get really upset out of nowhere. And people wouldn't really understand why. I understand that it was really difficult to understand what I was going through. And I still feel pretty guilty about what the people around me had to see, you know, my breakdowns, my upset. And I do think like a lot of my older friendship groups have that as like their last image of me and who I am, and that just made me really sad. Like, I wish I could have given a better impression. You know? It's a shame. But either way, I eventually found my own space. And then I moved between share accommodation for a while, you know? And housemates are very on and off. But I've had some good times. And the housing situation I'm in now, you know, it's not that bad. Ever since I left where my mother was, though, I've had minimal contact with her. I've not given her my phone number or anything along those lines. It's sort of like, I've tried to cut ties and I still don't know if it's entirely the right thing, but I feel like me reappearing, like, she has to be able to take accountability for her mistakes, and she needs to find emotional intelligence, and I don't know if she's capable of finding that with me still being around. I don't know if she'll have the drive to do it if me and my sister are still back in her life. So it's been about 5 years since I last actually spoke to her. And I don't know if I want that to change. I don't know if me being back in her life is even a good idea. But all I hope is that she gets the help she needs. And as always, I just want people who are troubled and who I think are problematic to just have a bit of self-reflection and understand how other people feel and try to, you know, move forward from that. And have a want to become the best version of yourself. Sorry, I'm just going to take a drink of water. But ever since I left, well, I've been in and out of therapy. So the first place I went to was like if I'm honest, it was an anti-self-harming place, because often, I mean, a lot of my trauma and stuff, I'd often believe that I deserved to be hurt, because often my mother would punish me with, like, by attacking me, like, near the end, and I have this, like, go-to feeling in my subconsciousness that hurt is what I deserve when I do wrong. And it's really problematic for people to be around. If there is an incredibly stressful situation, which I haven't found in quite a long while, but it is one of my go-to reactions when I'm incredibly stressed, to just keep hitting myself. I've never hurt another person physically, and I never would want to. Not after what I experienced, but I wish I understood that when, you know, my brain goes potato mode and I'm stressed. I wish I'd understand that. And, you know, sometimes it's tricky. It's tricky to get yourself to understand that when it's something that you started picking up at a young age and, you know, you didn't get therapy until late. I'm out of therapy now, but I'm hoping I'll be able to go back one day. Because I still don't think I've unpacked a lot of the stuff that I've been through, I guess. And now I'm fast approaching 30, and it's like, if I want to be the best version of myself, it's something that I'll need to confront. So, yeah, I guess the best part of my life, though, and what kind of coincides with it, despite all the trauma, is my love for Pokemon. I feel like it's something that's gotten better and better as time's gone on, and although I've had a fair few slip-ups in my time, it's been a relatively nice, safe place where I'm just able to be myself. I'm able to be in a really good community, and I feel like it's something that I'm actually gifted at. Like, I struggle to find things that I truly feel like I click with, but I feel like this is one thing that I could potentially, given the right circumstance, take up to a professional level. I just keep needing the opportunities, because sadly I've been quite poor for a lot of my life, especially with my inability to you know, be in work or like sort of have the conventional cycle of work because of my conditions and my trauma. It's difficult for me to go into stuff like customer service because I'm so anxious around people. But a lot of entry-level jobs are customer service. But on the other hand, Pokemon, it just comes so naturally to me. Like playing the game, talking about it. It's something I really enjoy. I really, really enjoy. and games in general. Something that I just feel like I can always do and always. It's my happy place, you know. It's my happy place playing this with friends or trying to be the best kind of player I can be in whatever game I pick up. Because it's funny, I'm naturally quite a competitive player, and I'm always trying my best to better myself. Whatever I play. The only game where I can't do that in, or the games that I can't, are like visual novels. And I enjoy them because it's also a game where I can relax and I don't have to be as competitive or whatever. So you also have that on your side too. So that's cool. But Pokemon, especially, I started playing around 2012, so it was near the end of my school era. And I remember my first event was in Birmingham in 2012. And I think it was my friend and my friend's mum. And we went up in like a car. I think it was to Birmingham, the NEC. And it was... I literally went out in the first round. I did terrible. It was single elimination back then. So if you lost one game, one best of one game, you were out. That was it. And just to put it in perspective right now, the game is best of 3, and it's also Swiss. So all of them guarantees a much longer tournament run if you want to. You can drop out whenever you want, but yeah, I just remember how fun it was to be part of that community and to be around people who love the game. It was really special. In 2013, I got a top 32 finish at the National Championships. And that went on really late, till like about midnight. Like, that tournament was not very well organized, but we all stayed because we loved that game so damn much. I've been in and out of different groups. I had a performance in 2017, but overall, I've just been incredibly inconsistent because of my mental health. It's prevented me from clutching out major finishes, I think. I'd often always go 6 and 3 in a tournament when you need to go X and 2 to reach the next stage. And it was definitely a mental block that I went through. But as of recently, in 2025, I became a regional champion, and my play has become significantly better. And it's something that I hope I can keep taking up and up each time, and, you know, go to the World Championships and see what I'm actually capable of. It's something I'm really excited about. I think on top of that as well, I've met some of my best friends through the community, and heck, even the game got me into like streaming and stuff as well, which is also moving on to the next topic. Moving on to my identity and my first relationship, because those kind of coincide. So I always knew that, I don't know, I never really fit in with, like, although I was born male, I never really fit in with the sort of masculine stereotypes. Like, for example, I remember I messed around with, like, I think it was, like, there was this weird Barbie toy that I think my sister got when she was young. And I always messed around with it because I found the mechanics of it interesting. It was less so how it looked or whatever. I didn't really care. I was just more interested in that than like static toy figures that looked cool but didn't really do anything. I was more interested in stuff that was like mechanical and you could interact with it in some way. And yeah, I never really got on with a lot of masculine trends or like stuff that, you know, you're supposed to pick up. Like, again, I've never really been into football, not really into sports. I'm not really into pulling people down either. Like, I mean, I do notice that it is something that people do for humor, but I do not like doing that myself. I don't like putting people down. And I feel like sometimes a lot of the stereotypical humor does rely on either self-deprecation or the, you know, putting down other people. And it's something that I try and avoid a lot. And if there's anything flawed about an individual, I'll try and discuss it with them. When my anxiety lets me, at least. Like, I definitely say I'm a lot more comfortable, you know, on the internet than I am in person. Sadly. So I can definitely do and say things that I probably wouldn't be as capable of in person unless I was exceptionally comfortable. And I will admit that. So yeah, this moves on to my first relationship, and something that's kind of still stuck with me. Like, trauma-wise, I'm getting better with it every year, but it still is my first realization of what a relationship feels like and what it's like to be free, I guess. Despite how problematic certain aspects of the relationship were, it's still my idea of it, you know? So anyway, let me elaborate. So, I ended up meeting my first partner through live streaming. I consider myself tan, so I like people sort of regardless of gender identity. But I do have I tend to have a leaning between androgynous, like in terms of a relationship, like romantically, it's between androgynous and feminine, not like hyper feminine. Like, I'm honestly not really a massive fan of makeup and stuff. Both for myself and for other people, but I understand why people wear it. But yeah, so I'm just not into like hyper masculine, like beards and stuff. But soft masculine's kind of cool. I haven't really romantically met anyone like that yet. But I guess conceptually, yeah, it could work. Either way. So yeah, I met them through streaming Project Diva, of all things. We were both the only Project Diva streamers at the time on Twitch. And yeah, we met through that, and it was the first time I really learned about polyamorous relationships. However, there were a few red flags even early on about it. Because I obviously agreed to the relationship, which was possibly a mistake, because they were in a relationship with someone else and it was agreed upon to be mono. But they were sort of said to the other partner that they needed to make it work, and as far as I'm aware, they're still together. And yeah. So from there, things were good, definitely at the time. And the main thing that I still miss to this day, and I'm hoping I find, I don't know, something to replicate it is we spent really long amounts of time in voice chat or whatever, and we just like talk, like just talk about any kind of topics. Like would have really deep conversations about stuff, and I really like that. It's something that I miss. I feel like in this era, it's surprisingly hard to have deep conversations with people. Like, I have groups that I play games in, for example, and like you'll bring up a topic to talk about, and they'll just like give a one-word answer, or like be very kind of, yeah, cool, but then not really be able to add any input, and it makes me feel a little bit sad in a way, because I really wish I was around more groups where there's opportunities to really like push people's brains. And I feel like I'm definitely missing that in my life right now. And I think that's one of the major things that I miss about my past relationship. Alongside obviously being a completely new experience. You know, what's it called? I really miss those conversations, I guess, and I miss being around someone for prolonged periods of time that shows you care and affection, I guess, because it wasn't something that I was used to growing up. Like, even though the relationship was flawed, and I see a lot of the flaws looking back now in terms of our behavior, because we both made mistakes. Like, I feel like accountability and communication is a very big deal in these sorts of things. You know. Yeah, accountability and communication. they go a long way. And I think, I mean, again, no, the first introduction to both, like, you know, sexuality and stuff. And I feel like it's definitely a topic that I don't think enough people breach or even come to an understanding of what they need from things. And I feel like it was something that I put perhaps on too high a pedestal, and it was one of my biggest faults in my first relationship, that perhaps I was overly like sexual, although it was like consensual. I kind of almost idolized that idea of like sexuality, and I feel like it's way more important. Like, I feel like as of right now, I could probably be around someone or have a romantic relationship with someone who's ace, to be honest. Because I feel like, to me, it's way more important to have quality time with someone, and someone who you can actually have a really long, deep conversation with, than someone who you can sleep with, in my eyes. And although, sure, it's a nice... It is a nice extra. Like, it's something cool that you can both consent to. But it's not as necessary in my eyes as a lot of people made out. And I feel like I almost idolized it because I hadn't really, you know, it was 25 and it was my first relationship. I idolized it too much. And it was definitely one of my greatest flaws, I think, in that whole relationship. And I really wish I could have focused more on addressing the other underlying issues rather than letting sexuality and stuff you know, get in the way of conversation, I think is what I was trying to say. Because often a lot of things that my ex would do were pretty problematic. Not in terms of sexuality or anything. Like, in terms of, like, conversations, for example, there was definitely an emotional intelligence gap, I think. And I was really bad as well, and I would often apologize profusely for stuff that I don't think was proportionate to what I did, but at the same time, it's what I did growing up as like a survival technique. So apologies were really easy to hand out, but understanding, I feel like, was less so. And I often apologize to my ex because of things like, for example, I would say like we were watching a film, and I would say like, for example, I wasn't really keen on that film, and they would get incredibly upset and ask me to apologize because it was wrong for me to say that I didn't like something that they liked. And that in itself is a problematic behavior in my eyes, because they essentially want people to agree, like, or to like everything that they do. But then, like, if I showed something, like, for example, I played through the whole original Xenoblade Chronicles, and they said that they didn't really enjoy it that much. And that's fine. I was actually chill with that, and I really encourage them having their own opinions. Whereas if I say the same thing about, like, for example, they wanted me to play a particular game, I think it was called Mad Father or something, and I said that I didn't really want to play it because that they told me not to be pushy about things that, like, I played. So they were being, like, kind of asking me multiple times. So I said that back to them, and then they got really upset at me and said, like, oh, don't play it. Like, that's an awful thing you did. You made me feel horrible. It was stuff like that where, like, the arguments did stem from them not being able to have a conversation about something and kind of rationalize in a calm way and come to, like, an agree to disagree, which I feel like is a really big sign of emotional intelligence nowadays. Like, unless obviously it's something that, like, hurts people. Like, I hate politically when people say, oh, I will agree to disagree on, like, people being transgender or something, because that's like just a basic human right. Like, that's not up for debate. that's just how people want to live, and that's something that should be accepted. And it's only by the culture that we live in that it's even become so much of a problem. Like, westernized media and stuff, or just westernized culture, is very much big on very binary gender, I'd say. Everything's very binary. And I think that's problematic in itself. So yeah, that's kind of explains my thought process there. However, one thing that I really did mess up with in that relationship as well was I was very prone to meltdowns. If I ever did something wrong, I would blame myself, and then sometimes I'd end up, like, just hitting myself. As I explained, that's one of my old habits of dealing with trauma, and it would really sort of, like, cause stress to my ex, and it was something that ultimately ended up ending the relationship, because eventually there was sort of a big, it was near, like, the last 2 months of the relationship. The poly dynamic meant that my ex eventually wanted to move house. Oh no, sorry, not they wanted to move house, they needed to move house because they were living with their parents and were getting evicted, essentially. So from that, they wanted to move in with one of their friends, who they insisted there was no romantic connection there, they'd known each other for 5 years. But then the instant they moved over, they had romantic feelings for them very quickly. Or firstly, I should say sexual feelings. And then they said that, oh, well, I don't have any romantic feelings. And then within a week, they were like, okay, I'm starting to get romantic feelings. I've had sex with them now. You know, stuff like that. and everything moved very quickly. And in that time, I initially said that I was okay with it, and I'll be honest, I feel like I kind of felt like I needed to say that because it would have been hypocritical to have let myself get into a poly relationship at the start, but then not be comfortable with this. But in hindsight, I think it was right, despite being constantly told that it wasn't okay, that I wasn't okay with the relationship happening. I still think it was really necessary to put my foot down on the boundary more and to stick up for myself, because I didn't. I kept buckling down under pressure and saying that was okay, and then changing my mind when I was so upset with things that I couldn't hide it. And then every time I was upset, they'll tell me that, like, I thought things were okay, and then they'd punish me by not talking to me properly again for another week. Stuff like that. And it happened for, like, over a month, and I was just, like, an absolute wreck, because I was barely able to talk to my relationship partner. And again, like, I tried all sorts of different methods to almost, like, get their attention, I guess, like an idiot. Like, I tried drawing artwork, and they didn't really like the fact that I was drawing stuff with them in it, and I wanted to try and get their attention, like drawing, like, cute romantic things and stuff. It was something they really didn't like, and they wanted to just explore their time with this new relationship. But at the same time, they didn't want to put time aside to spend with any of the other partners. They directly told me at one point that their feelings are more important than mine in this relationship. And that was a massive turning point for me, I feel, because it reinstated the worry of, you know, being less important than the person I looked up to, the person I shared so much with. It was someone who was wanting to move towards and live together with, you know? It messed me up that they just, at the end of the day, felt a little bit disposable, I guess. And although, again, I was too focused on sexuality at times, I still don't think it was right the way I was treated. And it still upsets me to this day that I've not had an apology for... I mean, I don't even want an apology for them to make up with me at this point, because I feel like I couldn't really be around them without having romantic feelings for them, sadly. So I know it's something that I ultimately have to move on with, but the process, I feel like, would be a lot easier if they were able to apologize themselves and understand why I was so upset with things. Because I still, well, I feel like they've moved on at this point, so it's not something that's going to happen. And I am glad that they've moved on to a degree, but I just wish I still didn't experience pain thinking about things. Really. I went through a massive downward spiral after the breakup. I ended up doing the silly thing of going over to America, which is where they live, because it was a long-distance relationship. I ended up going to America to both play in a Pokemon tournament, which I love, and to try and potentially sort things out. And they did overpromise a little bit on what would happen when I went over. And they ended up sort of... nothing really happened. I wanted to spend time with them. I wanted to experience things with them. And I communicated this with them. And they said to me that, like, I was asking for too much. Whereas on the way over, they promised me that wouldn't be the case, and that things would be resolved. And then they sort of blamed me on, like, everyone in the whole poly relationship ended up pointing out that I was at fault for a lot of the stuff going on. And the whole dynamic just wasn't very equal. And near the end, I had a complete public meltdown. I still feel absolutely horrific, and it's probably one of the worst things I've ever done. But I ended up just going like in the middle of a road and just screaming and hitting myself and being hysterical. I just simply could not control myself. It was like there was a couple of things that I did on the build up to that that I know made my ex uncomfortable. Like I ended up like hitting myself and being upset, and I felt like I couldn't, well, when I did communicate my feelings, they often felt shut down. So I felt very compressed. And on top of that, I had to live in a basement for a week because I caught COVID on the trip. It was COVID season. So I ended up being in the spare room by myself, not able to really spend time with my ex because they were pretty conscious about catching COVID. But even before I'd properly developed the symptoms, they wouldn't really spend, quality time with me. And to me, what I've realized is quality time is one of the most important factors in a relationship to me. And I hope in the future, if I end up finding someone that's, something that's prioritized really, like, for both of us. But I ended up doing that, and then just, things were never the same after I had that proper meltdown. They said themselves that they were uncomfortable around me, which is justified. But I remember when I went back, I was just crying on the airplane back, and I don't really cry that much. I feel like because of the repressed emotion I had when growing up, crying is very difficult for me. It doesn't happen much. But they ended up breaking up with me when I got back. And I ended up saying that like I wanted to die, and stuff that you shouldn't say because it comes across as very manipulative, like you're trying to get something out of them for I don't know. Even though it was how I felt, it wasn't right to tell them that. It wasn't right to make them feel like I was putting blame on them. But at the same time, they kept saying things like I was just like their exes, and that I was a horrible human being. Because I blocked them at one point because I needed space, they said that, oh, you blocked me, and that I shouldn't do things like that. But then they ended up blocking me later. I guess it's a bit ironic, but I guess that might be a culmination of their own emotions. It's fine for them to block me, but again, it was just the do as I say, not as I do, which seems to come up sadly with a lot of people who I have interacted with in the past or have shown me the most compassion at times, I guess. I feel like that's my most memorable relationship though, not just because of that, but also because of my gender identity. During that time, I found out that I was, in fact, non-binary. And my ex did too. We figured it both out. And it was a really amazing feeling because it validated this feeling of, like, otherness. Like, people had also experienced it too, you know? And I feel like that's an amazing thing in itself. And it's not something that people understand, and people... I mean, hell, there's barely any understanding on trans rights. And non-binary is very similar, but also, raising the concept of gender, which is a very, like, publicized thing in Western media. Like, it's made out to be very important. Gender roles, gender labels, that sort of thing. So... it's pretty difficult to explain to people sometimes, but I always try and make the effort. If someone's willing to listen, I'll always try and explain. Because to me, it's a really important part of myself. Because it makes me feel free. I remember my mother always used to dress me up in like shirts and stuff, and like now I feel like I can kind of dress freely how I want. And while I haven't messed around with more like wild styles of clothing or whatever, like I'm just happy that I feel like I can wear stuff that's more like neutral leaning. I could wear all my accessories, that I have like a little non-binary colored band. I really like the colors, so I wear that around, and it feels really nice. My sister is like a wonderful human being, in that she has always used the correct pronouns for me. Like, she's gone it upon herself to try and learn these things, and also correct her fiance if he ends up doing, using the wrong ones. And just everyone's been really awesome with that. And it's just a shame that people in society are still a bit weird about it. I think it's going to take a long time for it to be properly realized and acknowledged by people. And that's a massive shame. In fact, I've started trying to pay a lot more attention to Pride. I want to try and go to protests and stuff. I feel like it's something meaningful I can do with my time while I'm trying to do the long search for finding work that I feel like I'm capable of doing, because my anxiety, I've gone through a lot of jobs, a lot of different jobs. I've been a waiter, I've been door-to-door sales, I've been in a warehouse, I've been doing something involving miniature figures, I've been contract work, I've done contract work, I've done charity work, I've done all sorts of free volunteering work and educational courses, but nothing has stuck. Anything customer facing, I feel like my brain struggles to handle too many people, and I get very stressed, and it's like your brain kind of shuts off and can't think properly, It's like, imagine that. Imagine your brain just kind of not being able to think properly. Kind of like that. So, because of that, I mean, I've been trying to look for apprenticeships, but generally they're only open to under 25s, and this is what I was saying about possibly taking the wrong degree earlier, because I wish I had something that could lean into a more professional field, since a lot more of those jobs are more, well, less customer leaning, I guess. And to me, that's important. So yeah, again, unemployment is something that's people can be pretty judgmental about too. Like, people see it and they make assumptions that you're lazy, or it's very much not the case. I'm always wanting to be doing something. And I'm volunteering for charity work. Like, for example, I'm volunteering for my local Pride March in July. I currently volunteer for Point of Pride, which helps towards funding trans surgery in America for people. Where with the recent stuff that's happening over there, there's less and less, human rights, which is honestly terrifying. And I want to help as much as I can. And I think, on top of that, I just wish the world would be a little bit more of an understanding place. That to me is the main thing that stands out. I think there's a phrase for it. Like, I feel like people are getting more like, they're reluctant to question what's going on around them. So I think sometimes the media has like such a strong grip on people. It's almost like a lot of things appear almost cult-like, especially a lot of politics and the way people believe in stuff. Like, for me, it's pretty illogical to not be understanding of other people and those who are like, you know, different ethnicities, different cultures, different understandings of things, different disabilities, different genders. And a lot of politics wants to enforce this very strange, like, enforcing what other people do, enforcing what other people believe in. And I think that terrifies me. It's all about control. I don't think it's right to control people like that. I think people should get given information and then come to their own decisions about what they want. And not be so, or have this culture that's so judgmental of others. Like, that's something that's really important to know. I guess. So, I think I'm getting relatively close to the end of all the stuff that I wanted to talk about and know, which is good. There's probably more like smaller things that I've forgotten about myself, or at least don't come to mind right now. I really want the world to become a better place, and I guess I could start talking about my future goals. But one of them is I'm going to California this year, because I'm going to the World Championships in California. For Pokemon, that is. I've been invited multiple times, but it's the first time I've actually been able to go. And that's new and exciting for me. And with that, I'm hoping that I can at least make the second day. Like, that to me is going to be my goal. Although I have no idea how I'm going to get started for that. I guess I'm just going to watch some tournaments, play some tournaments online, and kind of come to an idea of what exactly I want to do, you know, with that whole thing. I guess one of the other major things before, you know, I turn 30, or like in general I'm in search for, I'm just in search of good conversation, in search of being around intellectual people. I'm in search of a long-term relationship, but I know something like that can't be rushed and it will come with amount of time. Like, it's not something you can push or force. And sadly, that does mean I don't know when to expect it. Like, I've been through a couple of relationships on my dating sites and stuff. One of them was good, but I figured out that I really want to be around someone close distance. And it's hard to find someone fitting, you know, the criteria of just having proper boundaries and, you know, having a good personality, infectious personality that I want to be around. Because I feel like I'm quite introverted, but an extroverted person would probably complement me pretty well. because I like people who can kind of be decisive, I guess. That is something I look out for. You know, that decisiveness. Because it's usually something that I have to do a lot in my groups, and it'd be nice for someone else to have that same kind of spark, you know? I guess other than that, I just want to do something that I enjoy. Just do that for as long as I can, whilst also, you know, giving voices to people and helping out in terms of charity work or whatever I can. You know, just make the world a little bit of a better place as much as I can. I think that to me is one of the most important things I can do with my life. Like, although I don't plan on like having any children or whatever, I do want the world to be better for those. I mean, if I did end up like having a child around, it probably would be through the adoption system, because I think there's still too many people who are stuck in the care system, and I would really love to help that. I don't really care about having my own children. I've never really had that urge, but I know some people do, and that's okay. Everyone lives life differently, you know? Everyone has or knows what they want and need. But I just want to help people out. Like, and on top of that, I want to be able to get back into therapy and find out my mental barriers and what's holding me back, you know? I want to be able to be the best version of myself, and when the time arises to be in a relationship or find an opportunity, that I'll be the best version of myself to take that on. I think that's all I really want. I think that about covers what I can think of for now. Other than stuff like my hobbies and interests, which, you know, are all pretty out there, like, for everyone to see. Like, I love music, I love metal music. I love just competitive gaming in general, and I love the fact that I want to see the best for this world. It does sadly mean I have to, like, stay away from a lot of media a lot of the time. Like, I'm intentionally trying to stay away from sites like Twitter, because except for knowing crucial information about like my tournament series and stuff, I don't want to get involved with that whole rabbit hole. I feel like it makes people's perspectives a bit smaller on things. Like, a lot of people become very cynical with the world when they're subject to social media for so long. And it's really sad to see how people can become, like, radicalized and stuff. It's just, it's so easy to do nowadays. So, all I want to do going forward, my goals, I want to be an optimistic person. And I don't want to lose a side of me or like gain a side of me that makes people worry about me. I want to be able to be a self-sustaining ball of happiness or something like that. I don't know. I want to be like, have a good aura around me, I guess is the phrase for it. I don't know. For me, I don't really want to take. I want to be able to give back to people and find my own happiness from doing that. So, again, I'm just putting my thoughts out to the world. I'm not expecting anyone to listen to this. 'Cause it's going to be very long, but you know, if there is anyone out there, or if the worst should happen to me, and one day I'm not here, there will be a mark of myself in the world that will be forever here, you know, about me, in depth, and it won't be taken away. So we'll just have to see where life takes me next, and hopefully it's on a good road. Because it's hard to know. It's hard to know with the current climate. But I will try my best. And anyone who listens to this, you should try your best to, you know, show understanding and compassion and, like, be the best version of yourself. Don't leave life with any regrets, I guess. And yeah, with that, I will cut this off now. And yeah, we'll see what time does, I guess. Hopefully we're going on a better path now. We'll see.